Welcome, welcome to Onward and Inward, man. Let's get started.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what's in the name, man? You said it, right? Onward and Inward.
So I used to always say further up and further in, but I've
Yeah,
never
that's
thought of it as like,
that's Richard Rohr's thing, right?
no, I think that's it's actually from the Chronicles of Narnia. Let me pull up who said it.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's like let's go further up, let's go further in. Further up and further in. Who said it? Um C.S. Lewis. Oh my gosh, it's a stage too. Further up and further in. But I like I like the name for psychotherapists because inward just is it's perfect.
Yeah,
Come further up, come further in. I forget who said it. I'm pretty sure it's in one of the Narnia books.
yeah. Cool,
So
man.
yeah, my dad always used to say it to me.
Oh
You know,
really?
yeah, yeah.
That's really cool, man. That's really cool. Um, yeah, I feel like I've heard Richard Rohr say it too, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man.
Yeah. I feel like it could go so many directions when it
Huh.
comes to uh why does everything seem to always go back to Jung? But
Yeah,
it seems like the name itself is sort of uh the always reaching forward
yeah,
towards the self,
yeah,
from being like the conscious ego reaching out
yeah,
towards the self always
yeah,
more, because we basically, well, I guess live, if I don't know how to summarize Jung because I probably understood one third of it, but if I understood any of it, it's like 10% of our conscious, 10% of who we are is conscious, and the rest is
yeah,
totally unconscious. And so it's part of I guess, an experience of capturing ourselves.
yeah. Dude, it's such a scary thought. But I think this is something I've said to you before in conversation, like, and I think this is takes on the kind of mindfulness perspective a lot. But like the more I do live my life, the less it feels like I'm living my life and the more it feels like it's just like happening to me,
Mm.
you know, and this is something that Sam Harris talks about a lot. He talks about, that freedom, actually being free is indistinguishable from believing that you're actually free, and it's I don't know. It's interesting because it just yeah. The more I live my life, it's like, dude, I'm like not doing any of this. Like, there's this part of me that's what wants to be like, and I think that's part of really what's behind like my desire to start podcasts too. I kind of talked to you about earlier wanting to just have a place for my own creativity.
Hmm.
Um, but I also feel like I'm more and more coming to this place of like it's not mine. like like none of this is mine, like none of it. And of
Hmm.
course I have
Hmm.
days and I have parts of me, right, that are obsessed with making things mine, and right there's is it in The Flower of Manhattan, Avett Brothers says like possession, the king of sin, this desire to kind of grab onto things and
Hmm.
possess them. And there's a real emotional experience, I think, for me when I guess I start talking about this, of like a real just gratitude of like, dude, none of this is mine. Like none of what I have belongs to me. And um I want to make sure not to take possession of the good things that have just happened to fall into my lap that, could be given freely and continue to be given and continue to be given. There's that sense of like, material things, like the more you give of it, the less you have of it. But like with these spiritual things, with the personal things, like the more you give of it, the more there is, like we've talked about that, like with friendship. And so um you just want to be a hippy dippy and just like spread the love, I guess.
Gosh, it makes me go in so many different directions.
Yeah.
But hearing you say that, it makes me think of how we do have a tendency to possess even new insights whenever
Right.
the new insights come, very
Yeah.
much like we possess a thing. I was watching the Minimalist documentary. I didn't finish it. I started it because I'm a minimalist. I don't need to watch the whole,
Right.
but I started it and he was talking about eh, I think it has some Dave Ramsey quotes in there. It has some other things, but they were talking about how I'll just say this. I know Richard Rohr has been quoted saying pretty much if you were to break down worldviews, it's the materialist worldview, it's the spiritual worldview, it's the priestly worldview, or the incarnational worldview. And how could all of us in the West basically not be materialists? Because
Yeah.
that's how we have to be to function in this
Yeah.
economy. Like to be able
Yeah.
to survive, we have to
Yeah.
be very thing oriented. I mean, if you're not buying the right things,
Yeah.
you're going to be buying more of the wrong things, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And it's so easy to get obsessive with that.
it is. I was
You
doing
know.
that yesterday, toggling between colorways of shoes because I found out that if you rotate between three pairs of running shoes, all of
Right.
them last 1.5 times as long. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, all of my favorite shoes are on sale and they're all going quick. I just found
Yeah.
myself for like a half an
Yeah.
hour toggling between
Yeah.
5 different colorways.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did because now on one level I have the right stuff now to where I
Yeah.
don't need to think about it.
Yeah.
As there's that logic, but
Yeah.
I'm
But there's
also like
always
in
more
thinking about
stuff.
it, there's always more stuff and I'm going to
There's
be
just
doing
one
this
more
for other stuff.
dude, that and that's the thing that I've started realizing, like there's just something else to fill up that space. And so I want to ask you about those other four. What are what are those other four? I'm glad we're talking about materialism because this is something that's just so this is my growth edge right now. And I think there was a Sam Harris audio on waking up of like spiritual materialism.
That's what I was going to say about possessing concepts
Yeah.
and that's just been the death of my spiritual life in the last month. Is like when I'm stressed, I try to hold on to like what worked in the past and I bring it up as a
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
and it's dead.
Yeah.
Dead. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's what
man.
he means by spiritual materialism, but I was just thinking like along those lines of wanting to possess even ideas
Yeah,
or
or
something
feelings.
or
Feeling
feelings.
states. I think that's the way. I don't honestly, I don't remember what he said about it. Like it makes I've been wanting to go back and listen to it again. But the phrase spiritual materialism is a really cool, right? Like backwards thing, materialism, spirit, right? Like, yeah. Um, but the thing I think I started to my commitment to 2024, I think is really to try to curb my materialism. And one of the ways I'm trying to do that is just in utilizing mindfulness of noting of like every time I have the thought of wanting to possess something, especially material, but also spiritual, like I'm just trying to note like, okay, that's one thing, like that's materialistic. And I'm trying to make the commitment to do this, like just like this is my commitment, because just what you said, like, dude, there's always something to fill that gap. And it's like I was talking to people, I think I've told you this, the Fantastic Mr. Fox. At the very beginning starts out, he's like getting into the chicken whatever thing. And then he's sitting underneath this trap. He's like, it looks like a fox trap. And it's like, oh, this thing, they probably want you to touch this thing. And then the fox trap falls. He goes, yeah. And he does it. And the fox trap falls and he's stuck. And that's what I feel like my materialistic, like I've heard the phrase hedonic treadmill, right? There's like just something there, but there's always something else that we want. And this is that process of like, I want this thing and then I get it. And it's like, right in Star Wars, like, it's a trap. Like, but it just like happens again and again and again.
Yeah.
And like, man, I just like in that kind of spiritual sense too, man, I don't want it to be about like when I have 5 kids. I don't want it to be about like when I have my PhD. Like, I don't want it to be about like when I have the house. Like, I have a car, I have a house, I have a great place to live with people that love me. Like I really do want to be here. And so I really, I was journaling the other day and I really am trying to commit to an interior poverty. I think it's just like something just connected, and I think it's related to this. I think an interior poverty is the opposite of a spiritual materialism. An interior poverty isn't like grasping for this feeling state and like trying to keep it, whether it's a feeling of safety or a feeling of peace or a feeling of excitement. Like I think that interior poverty is just allowing everything to be exactly as it is. I don't know what it means, dude. That's I guess why I'm exploring it. But
Maybe that's it,
yeah,
is not knowing what it is.
yeah, probably, dude.
Yeah.
But tell
That's
me,
that,
you were talking
that's
about
that.
those four things. I
I
think I
was just
cut you
gonna make
off.
a quick. I was make a quick comment about what you were just saying. Last night I was with a couple friends and I don't know where this came from, but I just made the comment. I was like, "Do you guys ever feel like the more healed you become, the more boring you become?"
Yeah.
And so we were like, "Wait a minute, that's like a great business idea. We can make T-shirts that say, uh, so like something like stay resentful or something like for artists, be like, uh, don't wake up too much."
Yes. Yes,
I don't
dude.
know. None of these are good taglines, but
Wait, no,
just
did you see
I
that video I sent you of the guy, the like too many hugs will mess up your jump shot.
too many what?
Hugs.
Oh yeah, bro. Yeah, like the worst thing that ever happened to me in my success is that my stepfather, he went and he loved me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Like, the more I find that I'm just okay the way that I am, and that doesn't mean that I don't have a responsibility. I mean, it takes away
Yeah,
some of
dude.
the ambition of like I want to be something, and it makes me say, okay, the peaceful life, there's nothing wrong with it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That would be an incredible grace to be able to live a life of peace.
And be at
But it
peace with
does,
it.
and to be at peace with it, which is, that takes
Yeah.
some degree, I think, of healing. But um, sometimes then on the flip side, when I get into that space, then rather than going out and being ambitious, I start to feel the responsibility bug.
Yes.
Um, So anyway, that was a what was coming up for me when you were saying that. Should I don't really remember all of the
Yeah.
spirit like these worldviews, but I can give you what I remember. This
Yeah. Well, real
worldview.
quick, I think your audio
You're
is a
cutting.
little jank. You want to try to just unplug your headphones and plug it back in real quick?
Yeah, let's see. I think my audio is coming from my webcam.
Oh, cool. Mikey's gone.
Is the audio any better?
Say something more.
Check one. Hello, can you hear me? Here,
Could be
actually,
on,
let's see
might
if
just
the
be on,
audio is
it might just be on my side too. It's just like perseverating a little bit.
meaning like ruminating. What do you mean?
Okay, actually, it's good now.
I think I'm gonna get closer to it. The mic's right up here.
Okay, cool. It was kind of just like almost like groaning on the back. It sounded like a little rattle, like you would talk and there was a little rattle, but it sounded like it was like maybe just like a little lag.
Groaning on the back makes me. It sounds like you're telling me about a whiskey. It really starts to groan on the back.
Dude, we're not gonna go further on and further in about that.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Yeah, this
so
is
but
really interesting. I think
yeah,
you'll
yeah.
find this really interesting. So, The Sacred Speaks is a podcast with John Price. He did an interview with Richard Rohr about the Universal Christ right when that book came out. John
Yeah,
Price is a Jungian analyst who
cool.
is sort of like brings on just very interesting characters as part of his own. I think the podcast started as like a personal research study, and now it's just like this awesome thing. And it's a really cool conversation. You can tell he just is geeking out over Richard Rohr. Because Rohr read a lot, like I think is very influenced by Jung. But
Yeah.
the one cool insight is that we've got the materialist worldview, which just primarily the energy of awareness is going towards the physical realm, which is
Mm-hmm.
what we see, it's what we hear,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where our attention would go if we're sort of adopting primarily a materialist worldview.
Yeah.
But the way Richard says it is that like most of lower level organized religion is trying to get people from the materialist worldview to a spiritualist worldview, which is
Oh,
not the point. Like
yeah.
the spiritualist worldview would be more so uh contemplating truths maybe, or reflecting on things, like maybe think about the Platonic realm of forms,
Hmm. Hmm.
the archetypes
Yeah.
in like I think in Jungian terms it would be like the subtle plane, or if you're gonna go real hippy dippy, it's the astral plane.
Mm.
It's
I
the
don't know
realm
any
of
of that stuff.
it's the realm of archetypes. It's the realm of
Yeah.
symbols. It's the
It's
realm
I
of
the
like
ideas.
intuition. It's ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ideas.
Yeah.
I guess maybe another way to describe it is the realm of angels. It's the
Yeah.
realm of personality, like parts.
Hmm.
Parts are on that subtle plane. Um, and most
Thoughts.
of thoughts, and thoughts can also represent lower, higher levels of like for example, we can have thoughts that represent more of a bodily sensation, or they can represent bodily needs, or we can have thoughts that are part of more like something that represents our heart.
Yeah.
In that sense, it would be more of like a spiritualist perspective. I forget what the priestly worldview is, but the way I don't know if you resonate with this, but our experience of meditation has been deconstructing the spiritualist worldview.
Yeah. Well,
Is
non-dual meditation, right?
or any kind of meditation where you say the importance is not entertaining the thought, but it's noticing that you are having one and come back to
Okay.
something
Yeah.
physical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Note
So that'd
like,
be both. That'd be, yeah, meditation as a whole. Yeah. Yeah.
but non-duality. This is what I think Richard Rohr is saying has in common with incarnational Christianity, is that spirit and body are only conceptually different,
Dude,
and,
yes.
and that the natural hiding place for spirit is not somewhere else,
Yeah,
but it's
man.
matter is the natural hiding place for spirit. And another way of saying it is that the divine indwelling is inside of man. That is the incarnation.
Yes.
That
Right.
God, there's the story he always tells about that hermit in the woods who he ran into him somewhere on Easter Sunday. And he was a hermit, and he knew that Richard wrote books, which is like maybe not a good hermit.
Yeah.
But he was like, Richard, you write books, you talk to the people, tell them that God is not up there.
Yeah.
And that sort of encapsulates the incarnational worldview, which is that the ultimate trump card of Christianity is that it's all here. It's
Yeah.
all
The kingdom of
here.
God is within you.
Kingdom of God is within.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is the insight of, right, that Locke Kelly said it so well at the beginning of um, Effortless Mindfulness on Waking Up, of this idea that's available across traditions, especially the meditative traditions, that whatever it is that we're waking up to is already here. Like, I mean, it's the same thing that you're saying. It's just like whatever it is, whatever awakening is, it's already present. And that's why we're waking up to it, right? Like, oh man, I think I was talking to someone last night about how I think this distinction between like the psychological and the spiritual, how can you tell the difference? And like, what's the difference? And I think it's just a different constructs that we just different constructs that we use, but it doesn't really make sense to me. And that's why I think Jung is such a, like, the deeper you go psychologically, the more it meets this spiritual character, right? Like, it's just like looking at mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is first like a practice of the breath, and then you get to this level. It's like, dude, this feels like an out of body experience. Like, that's kind of weird. Like, why do and it's not like, yeah, I totally jive with this notion. And this is what the church believes, right? Hylomorphic dualism. And your dad says it in his book, Personal of JP2, that we believe that the church believes that um, spirit is materialized. What is it? We are in mattered spirits, or like spiritual. There was two words that was just like, I forget what they are now, but like kind of cool. And yeah, I think whatever, if there is maybe a distinction between psychological and spiritual, which I don't really think there is, it's closer than we can experience. And um, yeah, this concept, it's interesting, right? Because we talk about like further on and further in, like this kind of going out, this kind of grasping, but it's all like, I don't love the word deconstructing because I feel like there's such an emotional, cultural baggage in that right now. Um,
Partially because I think it's associated with postmodern thinkers who did it to some degree without providing an alternative narrative,
yeah,
like knowing that the deconstruction that doesn't lead to some form of reconstruction will lead to meaninglessness,
yeah,
or
yeah,
despair. There has to be some kind of a lot of those authors didn't provide an alternative
yeah,
framework. Not
yeah,
that they're wrong. I don't think that they're wrong about the
yeah.
deconstruction.
Dude, it's so hard when we start talking about this stuff in like philosophy and cultural and because it's like, dude, I like know barely enough to listen. And I don't even really know what postmodernist is. I like kind of do, but it's like someone starts talking about it and I'm just like, well, I've heard that word a bunch of times, so I'm just trying to jumble these ideas together. I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
do like want to understand philosophically the underpinnings. That's one of my real interests that I don't really get to exercise as much as I'd like. But what was you said there was those four types or something like that, the material, the spiritual, the
The
priestly,
priestly and the incarnational.
oh, and the incarnational. And so,
The incarnational could probably be interchangeable with the non-dual.
okay, cool.
Seeing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
reality as it is apparently, the reality is two, reality is three, reality is
Yeah.
split. You can split it into as many distinctions as you want, but non-duality is not saying it's not those. It's saying it's fundamentally not two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fundamentally one thing.
Yeah.
And learning to toggle between that state of awareness is extremely helpful for
Right.
personal and spiritual development as a creature.
Right. Yeah, man, I was doing this morning, I was doing a walking meditation from Sam
Ooh,
Harris. And I was getting my 10 minutes of sunlight in on my Andrew Huberman routine. And the walking meditation is something that I really, really want to get more at because I hear like Sam and other people really talking about it essentially because it's like sitting is too painful when you try to do it for so long. And Sam really says like, well, this is his whole idea, right? The whole goal of meditation is to erase the distinction between a formal meditation practice and my lived experience in the everyday. Is to bring that same type of awareness. Like he says that at a couple different places, like do whatever you're doing next. Don't change what you're doing, but bring the same attention to whatever it is that you're doing as you would to the breath if you're doing a formal meditation. And that's something that's kind of really resonated with me. But during the meditation, he was going right into the non-dual place. And he was saying just like kind of keep your focal length or whatever, kind of look at the world and just keep walking and notice what it feels like to be moving through the world. Right? Notice what it feels like for you to be kind of this autonomous being moving through the world. And then he said, and now see if you can shift your perception, seeing the world coming towards you. Like rather than me being the individual that's walking up and down the street, imagine it's almost like the street is a treadmill and you're kind of just in this place. And all of a sudden, dude, it got really weird. Like it was just a bizarre experience. It felt like I was on, I don't know, you ever play like Tunnel Runner or Train Runner, where it's like this
yeah.
dude that's running and there's three paths and you're trying to
Temple
get the
Run,
coin.
Temple
Temple
Run.
Run. Yeah, 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 yeah. Temple
Yeah.
Run. Like that's what it felt like all of a sudden. Is like this shift in viewpoint of like the world coming at me. But yeah, I guess it's a digression of just saying I'm really interested in kind of getting a little bit more into the walking meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to me that like something that my sister and I, Maria, we both do the Waking Up app. I actually have a couple friends on there, Elias
yeah,
Longacre, and I think James Downs is on there too. You
dude,
know,
I was
I,
talking to James last night trying to get him hooked.
um, one thing that to me, I'll just say from my experience is that when I have done just waking up, I find that it feels to me like what it gives me is more of like just deconstruct the world
Right.
without an alternative vision. Like he is sort of providing a lot of questions, and he is deconstructing your awareness
Yeah.
to the point where, you know, you can have these experiences where you, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, all of my experiences of transcending the self have been very, very temporary
Yeah.
and immediately replaced by, oh, I don't know, what was that? And so I don't know if I just have a very strong ego or there has to be a good reason for it. But I guess my point is that it seems to me that spirituality, the difference between it and psychology is that psychology would be sort of, this is what it seems to be that the world means by the difference,
Yeah.
implicitly, that psychology is morally neutral and spirituality is on the realm of good and evil. Like it has to do
Dude,
with moral
yeah.
claims.
I
And but
think
it's
that
the
is a
same
really,
content.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But the problem is well, I'm holding a hammer. What does
Where
that say?
did where
Archetypal.
did the hammer come from?
I was replacing my key fob battery with this, but who knows? Maybe we're building something together.
Dude,
There's an archetypal significance to this.
I'm asking you, where'd you get that hammer? I know that's a crazy question.
Well, it was in my cabinet, and yesterday I was replacing my RAV4 key fob. So it's been here for 24 hours sitting on my
That's
desk.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Dude, no, just taking me back to childhood because I had my dad had a hammer like that and I loved it because it has like the
Yeah, you just sit there and you fiddle it
yeah,
and twist it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Gotta get me one of those. I thought you were gonna tell me this is my new key fob. Like you have a hammer and on the other side it's just a
Baton Rouge
bead.
crime is on the rise, bro. I just want
Oh.
to make sure I can. There's a pepper spray bottle in here somewhere.
Telescoping
The
baton.
but the problem is that with the good and evil thing is that part of what Sam does, I think, is he does take away a lot of the charge of what implicitly feels good and evil, and part of
Yeah,
that, like he helps you to see that a lot more stuff is morally neutral, and
yeah.
that is the postmodern move. That is
That it's
the
all neutral, that there are no values, right?
yeah. Like I think I don't. Jung was very complicated, and he was someone who tried to integrate science and religion, and I think probably did it better than anybody in the
Yeah.
modern time. But he,
Because Peterson says that he was, is it right that Peterson said that he is his goal is to respond to Nietzsche?
yeah,
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche was sort of everybody during the time of Jung was reading Nietzsche, and
Yeah.
he was somebody who um, wrote about. I guess a lot of the influence of Carl Jung writing about the shadow is influenced
Yeah.
by Nietzsche's idea of the Antichrist.
It, it,
That's a whole rabbit hole that I don't know as much about as I would like in
all
order to
right,
speak about.
let's avoid the rabbit holes that we don't know
Yeah,
enough to talk about well.
yeah. Um, but to your point, like I think he reverenced the postmodern dilemma of nihilism.
Mm,
He said something like the whole difficulty of modern man is to find is to experience meaning in the presence of mere being or something like that, which is that is the
say that
essence
again.
of the dilemma of, I'm paraphrasing if anybody is out there
No,
who's
it sounds
read
great
Jung.
though.
If anybody has read Jung extensively, though, they're going to know that each one of these words is incredibly important. So this is probably this is Mikey now, Mikey slash Jung. But uh, modern man's dilemma is to find meaning in the presence of mere being,
Yeah, I love that.
which you probably resonate with as somebody who
Dude,
has deconstructed all kinds of implicit,
yeah.
like meaning making moves that are
Yeah.
unconscious and reflexive that you could
So
witness
it's the
and manipulate.
materialism.
So it leads
You
to
know, it
materialism. Oh, go
well,
ahead.
I think I mean, I guess for me, it's that that's my experience of materialism. And what I think the materialism process is, that process of like wanting something, getting it, it's just a placeholder for my own fear of being in reality. Like that's what materialism does for me, John Paul, is I get at home and I'm like scrolling on REI or I'm scrolling on Huckberry or whatever. And it's because I'm afraid to be here right now,
Hmm.
and that like yeah, it brings like kind of tears to my eyes just because it's such a sad way to be,
Mm-hmm.
of like and the reason it's sad is because it's such a habit that then it's like my wife is talking to me and I start pulling up my phone, and then it's like, why don't I want to be here right now? Or not why, like stepping back and being like, dude, what's happening? Like, like I don't want to. I would like to learn how to just be here and be here with whatever and whoever is in front of me. And I think that's the key, is because I think really we're made for relationships. Like we don't exist apart from relationships. We're created in a relationship.
Mhm.
We are literally the product of relations
Mhm.
between people. And so it's like, yeah, life is going by really fast. And I even like to think that I'm somebody who has some sense of being able to slow down, has had mentors and people who have kind of showed me the value of that. And there's just something that I'm saddened by the depth of the habit of materialism that I have, and how aggressively how aggressively and pervasively it pulls me away from the very things in my life that I say are most meaningful. So
Mhm.
that like quote
Mhm.
I just really resounded with me of like, yeah, finding meaning in being. Well, I'm being, like I'm a being, and this is being, and I just mindfulness practice has been so life transformative, because I think it's helped me to actually shift these highfalutin ideas of like leisure and slowing down and being present. And it's what it's done is it's taken this like idea of like, I want to be more present, and actually like
Mhm.
helped me to practice that every day in the specific way. Like I feel like so often we're kind of given maybe spiritual or even psychological tenets that are these like great ideas and super, super helpful. And then it's kind of like, so do that thing. And it's like, yeah, but how do I get from here to there?
Yeah.
Like, and so I love Andy on Headspace, right? Because that's like really where I learned, and Sam Harris as well in his app. But I really want to be able to be here right now, like wherever that is, whenever that is.
You see
And
how
it is, yeah,
you have a vision for your meditation practice that's implicit, maybe even invisible,
yeah,
which is why
yeah.
it's spiritual. Like for you, your
There's a
heart is
value of
engaged.
being here.
There's a value
Yeah, yeah,
engaged
yeah,
that your heart says it's important for me to be here, not to
yeah.
deconstruct to
Yes,
nothing, but because it allows me to be, it allows me to be more for my
yeah,
people. And so in
yeah.
that sense, it's spiritual. This is why I think there's some, I'll just say this. I think that for me, I've experienced some overlap of Christianity as the heartbeat of my spiritual life with the practice of meditation that has left me feeling incredibly, I would say, the most spiritually alive I've ever been.
Dude, yeah,
When it's just Christianity, what happens for me is I become idealistic
yeah,
and detached from reality, and or
yeah,
detached from the material reality,
yeah,
which I think is a product of the spiritualist worldview, which is where
yeah,
you renounce the flesh, you renounce
yeah.
the world.
Which is the Descartes, right? That's from Descartes, right? I mean, or maybe best articulated in Descartes of like, we're cogs in the machine, right? Like there's the spiritual and there's material, and those are like split.
I don't know enough about Descartes, but I think so. I also think my understanding is that he's been largely historically misread. But
Oh
I
yeah,
think that's been the result, is this dualism of mind and spirit,
yeah,
and using spirit to overcome mind.
yeah,
But someone
Yeah,
like Jung has said that in all of in Western Europe, where there was an obsession with dualistic clarity and spirit overcoming body, there's an immense shadow to that. Like
uh,
there's going to be an attraction to cultures where there is more of a embodied way of experiencing pleasure and sharing
yeah,
affection and sharing
yeah,
love. there's going to be there's going to be a whole shadow to
yeah,
using spirit to overcome the flesh, especially in regards to sexuality,
yeah, man.
because that's a powerful force, and it doesn't go nowhere just by
Right.
you meditating on the word. Like
Yeah,
it has to find integration. I don't have an answer to that,
yeah,
but my point is I guess you have whenever I live in the Christian life without grounding in my actual body, without an
yeah,
embodiment
dude.
practice, let's call it,
Dude, yes.
I start to live more in the spiritualist worldview.
Yeah,
That's where my energy
yeah,
goes. When I just do mindfulness meditation without the heartbeat, I
yeah.
become materialist in the sense that like I become more invincible to guilt and shame because it's all
Hmm.
just been deconstructed. Whereas
Hmm.
something like Tom, what's his name? Not Thomas Merton, Thomas
Keating?
Eating's centering prayer.
Yeah,
The reason I think it works is because it's the perfect juxtaposition of the two. So rather than coming back to the breath, like pranayama, you're coming back to a sacred word like spirit, God, Father, love, being, whatever the sacred word is that stimulates your heart. But he says this so brilliantly. He says that the purpose of the sacred word is not to come back to the word itself, but the word represents your intention to consent to God's will. And
yeah.
so by returning to the word, what you're really doing is you're returning to letting go of the mind, coming back to the intention to consent to God's will.
Yeah,
And that's why eventually, as the practice deepens, when you let go of the word, you enter the
the intention's
same
still there.
emptiness, the intention
Yeah,
remains invisibly. And because
yeah,
of that, your contemplative experience is vastly different.
yeah.
It's how you
It's an
start and how you end.
experiential. Yeah, yeah, dude.
Go
Dude,
ahead, go ahead.
that's really cool. I was just gonna say it's experiential. Like, and I was
Mm.
thinking about like my experiences with like yoga and just like deep stretching and um I'd say like modern yoga, more like calisthenics and stretching than
Opening your
the word
chakras.
yoga is such a broad word and is used so many ways that like, yeah, it's hard to know what I'm even talking about when I say that, right? But like at least just focusing on like deep stretching, we were doing Ramwad at our house at Penn Ave. And we were doing, I don't know if it was a hamstring stretch or what it was, but it was like a 2 minute stretch. And that was the first time in my life that I had done that was the first time in my life that I'd really intentionally done a long stretch. And and the person said something in it, and we were just stretching, and it was like, okay, just like surrender to the tension that you feel in your hamstrings. And it opened up this experience of what surrender actually means. And I wasn't like surrendering spiritually to like some presence or like some, spirit, right? But I was like just saying like, okay, this feeling in my hamstrings, I'm not going to push into it. I'm not going to pull away from it. I'm going to let it happen. I'm going to let the tension be here and I'm just going to allow myself to be here with it. And why I love kind of deep stretching like yoga and like the kind of modern yoga is because I can begin my days with a experiential practice of what I want to do like spiritually, immaterially, in my heart, soul, and psyche, like towards the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think the other analogy is like a trust fall. Like there was a like just actually probably 2 years ago, right? Um when I started getting into, therapist focused supervision and really diving into the interpersonal kind of diagnostic domains and recognizing like my narcissistic defenses, which essentially say, when something's scary, I want to prop myself up. That's how but yeah, I think I've told you this story before. If I was in a supervision group, I started kind of feeling myself. And there was this kind of voice in my head that was saying, like, yeah, but you're right about this. And I was like, okay, but the way that I'm grabbing onto being right is pulling away from these people that I like love and respect, that I want to be close to. And I started to realize that one of the dangers of narcissism, even for people who maybe they're right about their abilities and being skilled in a certain way, is that, and I say this all the time, is like you can be in a big, beautiful mansion, but you're gonna be alone, and perhaps this is partly unconsciously inspired by The Great Divorce, right? Where C.S. Lewis says, he talks about those like kind of lower levels before the bus of like being so far out there, and that's literally what they are. It's like, and I think he said like, Napoleon Bonaparte, like you can see him and he's out there in a castle that's beautiful and it's just him. But the I started to try to actually experience like surrender, and what I realized is like, man, this just feels like a trust fall. And it was really painful. I think it was something of an ego death, right? Of like letting, and I think the ego death, right, this like dying to self is not a, it seems to have been interpreted in the legacy of the church oftentimes as a crushing. And I don't think it's so much of a crushing as it is just like a letting go, and um I think I told you this, that it was like, yeah, that time, and I was just really all of a sudden seeing all these defenses. I was seeing all these ways that I was just like desperately clinging to protect myself from getting hurt and stay in control. And it felt literally like a trust fall, like using that word spiritually, like existentially, it felt like I was just like falling through existence and like letting go. Um, and it was so scary, and it is so scary when that comes up. But there's such uh, a peace in knowing that like I don't have to hold on anymore. It's okay for me to fall. Like, yeah. So that's all to say is like that experience of like the trust fall and that experience of like deep stretching where it's like I think we do, it's really valuable to have experiential experiences that parallel these emotional, psychological, spiritual desires of something like surrender, so that like when we're in that place in relationship, we can actually do it. Like, so when we're in that place of prayer, we can actually like let
Mm,
go, because I think that's been something that's been, you know, so powerful. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I hadn't ever experienced the trust fall, or if I hadn't ever taken like a massive whipper on a freaking, probably too drawn out line of rope in Red River Gorge with Robbie, because he's like, you should learn to fall. And I'm thinking like a huge fall on the rope, right? Climbing, or doing a trust fall, or like stretching in that way. Like,
mhm, mhm,
um, that experience is just such a training.
mhm. Yeah, that seems really well said. It seems like I wonder if your balancing act, which that is yoga, right? Yoga is
Yeah,
balancing. It's the rebalancing. That's why stretching is yoga,
yeah,
insofar as when we assume a position of being seated for long enough, we should probably stretch our bodies in the opposite ways, because what it
yeah,
does is it continues to allow our body to operate also in the opposite pole.
yeah,
This kind of thing happens with any kind of opposite,
yeah,
whether it's you know, if we're overcompensating in the direction of materialism, that's why the emphasis on not just meditating to just encounter matter as
Right.
it is, but maybe it's time to do some kind of practice that'll inflame your heart,
Yeah.
or what is the value behind all of this? How, like, that's why I love this idea of yoga as being a balancing act. And I wonder if for you, the reason that you emphasize the material is being rooted in maybe the American epicenter of Catholic culture,
Yeah.
um, being born and raised in Steubenville at Franciscan. Your the current climate is spiritualism,
Yeah.
partially because the current cultural climate is materialism.
Yeah.
And for you, the like part of the integration, it sounds like, is bringing materialism and it's at the service
Yeah.
of spirituality
Yeah.
to keep it
Yeah.
from being I'm watching Avatar Last Airbender, which is, by the way, one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. It's
Dude,
100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I've been thinking about starting that again, man.
Start
That's
again. I
so
got I
cool.
got Paul Nohara just finished it. I'm like on season 3. I saw him in Canada, and within like a week he was like, I did the whole show.
No, that's
Yeah,
crazy. Dude,
James
I
is back
love
on
that
it again.
show when I was younger. That's yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm reading Karen McLaurin's Language of Emotions, and she uses wind,
Yeah, you were
water,
telling me
fire,
about
earth
this. Yeah, yeah.
to describe human experiences. And I don't really know what she means by fire yet, but air, I'm pretty sure in the tradition is like thinking. It's the air
Hmm.
element is like whatever you want to say, these chakras, but it's the part of us that's capable of predicting the future, reflecting on the past, having a self concept, having a
Yeah.
narrative language, any sort of like abstraction that we experience it up here. And I don't know if you work when you work
Yeah.
with clients, when they're in blended with a manager, that
Dude.
not only do they
Yeah.
feel like they're up here, but often, like right now, I'm probably
Yeah.
speaking from a lot of that air quality where I feel like
Yeah.
I'm up here. How does there a leaf in my hand? I just picked it off my thing.
Dude, what is like, is there someone behind your computer just like handing you these
And
random
maybe I
objects?
don't know. Maybe the archetype that needs to be addressed unconsciously is coming out. So maybe there's growth happening.
Oh, I
But
hope so.
um,
That
yeah,
leaf ain't
like
growing anymore, I can tell you that.
you can tell that I'm probably in that
Yeah.
upper quality because my eyes go up when I'm thinking. I look
Oh
up, which
yeah?
means I notice that people when they're in their manager tend to like look away from
Mm.
reality or matter in front of
Yeah.
them because it has to do with being elsewhere.
Yeah.
It has to be doing you are in a different realm when you're thinking. You're in the subtle
Yeah.
realm, and that's airbending, right? Like maybe
Oh, wow.
physical sensations is earthbending. Like that's having like tingling in your chest,
Yeah.
a gut feeling, um, pressure in your shoulders. And then the water bending is the emotional quality. It's like
Yeah.
I have this feeling towards this person, place, or thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess all of yoga is the balancing of like
Yeah.
if I'm spending too much time intellectualizing, it's probably time to get back in my body and to
Yeah.
communicate and socialize with other beings. If I'm
Yeah.
socializing with other beings and getting to the point where I'm just living in like I'm eating a
Yeah.
lot, I'm drinking a lot, it's great. It's maybe time to spend some time in the air world
Yeah, man.
to reorient myself. And that is yoga in some
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah.
it's almost like for you, I wonder if that resonates, that the spiritualist worldview of being overly preoccupied with the
Yeah.
air, with
Yeah.
the thinking realm without it becoming embodied,
Yes.
inclines you towards the embodiment practices.
Yeah, and I think you said it there. It's like the without it being becoming embodied. And that's I think that just hits the nail on the head of what it is the embodiment is the hinge or the fulcrum in which both the physical and the spiritual have to meet, right? And you were talking about like the principle of opposites. This is like I feel like it's good to just like hit the nail on the head with this because this is one of Jung's principles of psychic energy. Is that for every impulse, it's the same physical principle. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And he just took those and applied them to psychology. So for every intention, there's an equal and opposite intention, right? For every good impulse, there's an equal and opposite bad impulse, right? And like you're saying, when we like when I sit like this all day long, there's an equal and opposite form or like stretch that needs to take place. But if it doesn't, it gets repressed into your shadow, and then it takes on this shadow content and comes out like right. And I have freaking hip flexor issues, right? If I'm not acknowledging that there's this equal and opposite balance as well. So I think like that sense of, we have these thoughts, and when we try to push the thoughts down and get rid of them, they just go into our shadow. But that sense of, I think for me, what I like about the stretching and that kind of experience of surrender is that it's a parallel and the same of that spiritual experience. Like it's a place where those things I think meet. Um, and where I can train to, the Locke Kelly says, train to remain. And I think that's like, man, that's what I want to be doing in my life. Is like I want to train to remain like here, like wherever
Mhm.
wherever here is.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we can go there either physically to get it, or there like intellectually, like you were saying, the kind of manager energy.
Mhm.
Um, but it really is that, dude, that tension of just like trying to hold the both at the same time, that dialectic, the both and like,
Mhm. It reminds me, as you're saying, like for me, I've historically tried to hold tensions intellectually, but
mm,
and that what that has just done is made me so open-minded that I have no thoughts, because it's impossible
right?
maybe on some level to be intellectually holding
Yeah.
opposites if it's not
Well, that's kind of the
experientially.
peacemaker, right?
It is the peacemaker, is to do it on an intellectual front, but I think to
Hmm.
wrestle with opposites is to the principle of we cannot think our way to a new way of living. We have to live our way to a new way of thinking, I think comes into play here deeply. Where, yeah, it's one thing to say, like, yes, this truth is true and this opposite truth is
Yeah.
true. But it's one thing to say it has to be lived for the tension to really be reconciled, you know?
Yes.
And I think, I mean, you can see this balancing act happening in the liturgical cycle. You can
Yeah.
see that with maybe Lent, and
Yeah.
that being a time of lightening the ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the ego is too heavy, it can't be open to things beyond itself because its walls are so thick that it's unsweepable.
Yeah.
And if your ego, on the other hand, though, is too light, if you don't have a strong enough sense of self, you don't have clarity about your boundaries. My experience, I don't know, this is now totally amusing, is that when God comes to contact us, my being is too light to be contactable. It's too
Yeah.
transpersonal. It's
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like pure
Sam
awareness, and
Harris,
there's no, yeah,
pure consciousness,
there's no wrestling,
emptiness.
able to happen with
Yeah.
God because there's no
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if I don't know, this balancing act happens, seems liturgically. I think you'd find the book The History of Christian Thought really interesting. One way he notices this balancing act happen on a macro scale theologically is that there's been periods when God has been seen as more transcendent. And for example, in the Middle Ages, or with someone like Meister Eckhart, who was an Eastern inclined mystic, who I think the church, he's not canonized. It's still kind of like, I don't know what to make of this guy. But because he
Seems to
was
be all
living
the people
in,
that you and I are interested in.
well, yeah, well, even Thomas Aquinas was someone who defined God as the ground of being. I mean, I'm not
Uh-huh.
quoting it perfectly, but it's hard to have a relationship with the ground of being. And
Yeah.
when God is seen to be more transcendent,
Yeah.
uh, figures like angels and saints are more
Uh,
actively represented as intermediate beings.
yeah.
Because how can you relate to God if he is being itself? What is
That
that?
is
How do you
where I'm
even,
at spiritually, bro.
and
I
that
mean,
is
you
why
just
the
hit the
devotion,
nail on the head for like my experience of prayer is like trying to understand, like, man, I don't want to make God some projection that I'm just talking to. But also, like, I got to talk to someone.
The
you
way for
know?
me, I've worked through that
Yeah,
loophole. I don't know if this will work because, for one, I've found that when I follow the truth all the way to its final end, it leads to like not knowing the truth. Meaning like it's just so open-ended because any truth, if I'm not funneling it through like another value system, which is it good? Is this truth good? Is this truth beautiful? That's been a helpful way for me to kind of like determine whether or not something is true. Does it also come with its inherent
yeah,
packaging of both good and
yeah.
beautiful?
Right, the
Um,
transcendentals. Well, I think
yeah,
beautiful is argued about, but yeah,
yeah. But to that point, like what I've started to reflect on is if it's hard for me to see to like I deconstruct all things in my perception as projections, which I think is something that has lived with me since the beginning. I don't know
yes,
why. I think it's just being in the modern era. It's a very uh maybe Kantian metaphysics. I don't know. Now I'm getting bro sciencey, but the
dude, we've been bro sciencey for
we've been
about an
bro
hour and a
sciencing
half.
this whole time.
We've been we've been bro sciencey for the last 28 years, man.
25 years. For me, seeing God as the desire to find God, like
Yeah,
God is the desire for me to find him, and being frustrated with the metaphysics of like, how do I find you when everything's a projection? Like
yeah,
that force driving me forward is already God within me. I
right,
don't have anything really profound to say about that other than that. Sometimes that's hard to wrestle with because it's like, how do I relate to that?
right.
But
But that's an interesting thing because it's a different idea than the idea of a God-shaped hole,
mm,
right? Because the idea of the God-shaped hole, I think, suggests this idea that we need to go out to God, right? Where that idea that you said, which is like God living within me is my desire to find God, I think speaks more to that desire to go further on and further in, right? Onward and inward, and to recognize that our experience of self is a constellation of defenses, and it's within that I think that we experience self, no self, God, transcendence, the kingdom of heaven, like ecstasy, whatever it is. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting how you were saying that. I think that's really important and valuable.
yeah. And to that point of like the balancing act, historically, look at Protestants who see Jesus as their boyfriend, or I mean, that there are certain brands of evangelicalism, which is like Jesus is
Yeah,
my boyfriend. There's also just, a certain form of Christianity where Jesus Christ is the personal savior as the person,
yeah,
and that's the focus. In those places, there's less of a need for an angel or a saint as an
right,
intermediate being because Jesus becomes the immediate contact with God.
right,
And I
right.
find that to be incredibly interesting of what aspect of God is emphasized. Now,
Yeah,
what holes need to be filled in the
yeah,
religious sphere?
yeah,
Um, and it makes sense that if we live in a spiritualizing time in Western religion, or at least American Christianity, there's going to be a movement towards contemplative practices.
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
And maybe if all there was an emphasis towards contemplative practice, there would be. I love the basic model of, you know, the goal of thinkers is to become feelers, and the goal of feelers is to become
Huh.
doers, and the goal of doers is to become thinkers.
That's
You know,
interesting. I've never heard of that.
and it's
Is that
not to say like,
Enneagram?
I don't know what that is.
I know you're a big Enneagram guy.
Yeah, I like the Enneagram as a tool for
Yeah,
this very thing of
yeah,
like,
yeah,
if I have a tendency here, first of all, how is this actually just a compulsion
yeah.
that I've labeled a
Right.
virtue?
How's it defend? Yeah, dude. Yeah, totally. Woof. Yeah.
We've gone so many places. I'm curious to know, does anything seem to stick out to you as like, where have we landed? We've gone somewhere. Where have
Yeah.
we landed?
Nowhere. Because there's nowhere to land. Um, well, something that's two things have been on my mind. one of them was earlier. You mentioned Dave Ramsey, and I wanted to mention one of my favorite quotes from him, which is something like, "When the tide rolls out, you see who's been swimming naked,"
That'll be me.
or when the
I'm
tide.
still working on my emergency fund. That'll be
Yeah,
me.
dude. When the tide rolls out, you see who's been skinny dipping,
Uh,
which is hilarious. Secondly, I thought it's worth saying we were talking about, and maybe this is, but we talk about waking up. I find that when I do a variety of different people on waking up, I don't get that same experience of the kind of blandness or the kind of emptiness. Like um, I think that's something that's really, really key. I just finished Sitting in Stillness. Um,
Adi Ashanti, man, he goes all the way there.
dude, I freaking love that guy.
Dude, he sounds like Father Boniface.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, similar
That's
like
interesting.
inflection.
No,
It's
I
like
think
this is a different incarnation of Boniface.
yeah, yes, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know where we landed, man. I think something that's interesting for me. What's I guess where we landed ideally. I guess I'll come back to kind of what I said at the beginning, which I think true vulnerability is more about kind of what I'm experiencing now than it is the parts of myself that I'm talking about. Right? I mean, that's the difference. Am I talking about a part of myself or am I talking from a part of myself? And I'm trying to learn to be with the parts of myself more and allow them to come here and to know that I can hold the difference and protection. But there's like a part of myself that man gets so scared talking about spirituality, talking about religion, talking about um, being Catholic. A part of me that's like, oh my gosh, dude, I'm so scared because right, if you, it's so easy if you're trying to walk a path to get hit with stones from both sides.
Yeah.
And so I think for me there's a fear here for me of like, oh man, and this is what I think this experience of doing a conversation like this is like, oh man, there's a fear of me of like, hey, if I really let you see who I am, like, am I just gonna get rejected? If I really show up as I am, if I and there's a fear, we were talking before about a desire for just like creativity,
Mhm.
not creativity, curiosity, like talking about like one of the things that we want to be really present in these conversations is curiosity.
Mhm.
And there's a fear for me of like, oh my gosh, if I express my curiosity, am I going to get shamed? Am I going to get blamed? Am I going to get criticized? Am I going to get crushed?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, it may be, but I
Maybe.
want to be in this place of being where like that's okay.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that's coming up to for me is just this constant place of, oh my gosh, dude, there's so much knowledge. Even just hearing, I love talking to you and hear about the things that you're reading, because it's always like a really nice little feeling on like a lot of different ideas, but there's so much to know, so much to learn. And
Mhm.
I think that's what's fundamentally behind my openness to exploring these ideas, these concepts from various spiritualities, various religions, various philosophies, is that like, gosh, man, what the hell do I have to put a claim on reality? And like just this experience of like, man, this is not mine. Like I am a dwarf standing on the shoulders of giants. Like I am a person that's been given an inheritance, right? Socially, culturally, physically, emotionally, right? Like, and so I think that the place that this brings me is like I just really want to continue to explore these things and like be not afraid. Like I want to be thoughtful and conscientious and considerate, but not self-conscious in the sense of an anxious like fear of like it's scary to say things I'm curious about. And I think that's such
Mhm.
a tragic, I think it's such a tragic place for us to be in society. Like I really
Mhm.
do. It's tragic to feel like, oh man, I'm afraid of asking a question. Like I'm afraid
Mhm.
of I want to be sensitive to every person. And I
Mhm.
never want to insult anybody. I would never want to hurt somebody or put them off. But I also want to be, I want to care more about connecting with people than I care about my own fear of kind of self-protection from like pushing anyone away. So I think, for me, this conversation just brings me to a place of experience of like, I want to be here. I want to have these conversations. I want to practice the courage to explore things I think are worth exploring and ask questions that I feel are helpful to ask. Not like these important questions to ask, like but just like I'm curious, like, and I don't want to build a box for me to live in to protect me from the terrors of reality that cuts me off from all the immense beauty and connection and intimacy with people, with places. And so yeah, man, it's just brings me to a place of vulnerability, you
Mhm.
know, um, a fear of rejection, a fear
Mhm.
of critique, um, but a place of, I think, too, just like a desire to participate more fully in this mysterious existence that we find ourselves in.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm gonna just take a second to
Yeah.
absorb all that.
Oh, yeah,
Not
man.
not because it was too much.
Mm, yeah. Marinate in the presence of being.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I really like what you're saying. You feel in the experience of being curious, there's a vulnerability to being curious because
Yeah.
unless it's a sort of manufactured curiosity that is subtly posturing, that
Yes.
is that is control. You can do
Yeah.
that, but to be genuinely curious, which is way more thrilling and way more fruitful for
Yeah.
especially the person being curious, but everybody listening, is that
Yeah.
it it is a curiosity might be another way of saying it's an orientation towards what's most important right now, which means
Mm,
that which is most important is that which is both scary and dangerously unknown and
yeah.
known enough to be seen as tremendously valuable.
Yeah.
And so of course it's thrilling, but it's vulnerable because it doesn't allow us to premeditate what we think
Yeah.
quite as actively. And that's why I don't know if you feel this way. You mentioned earlier it's not me. When I
Yeah.
get into a state of speaking from curiosity and following that,
Yeah.
I sometimes have this experience of witnessing myself speaking.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm
Yeah.
not thinking about what I'm going to say. I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm about to say. Um, I am happening. I
Yeah.
am happening. Just like you put hydrogen peroxide in whatever to make a volcano. It's
Vinegar. Oh,
happening.
no, whatever it is. Yeah.
So yeah, I
Baking
forget
soda.
what
Yeah.
baking soda. Yeah. Um, and there's something vulnerable in that insofar as it reveals doubts that we have that won't toe the party line. So
Yeah.
that's scary. But I think it also reflects if there is a fear that we have, because I do resonate with that. Where I think it's hard not only because there's increased globalization of contacts with cultures with one
Yeah.
another, which creates an awareness of what's offensive for one culture is not
Yeah.
offensive for another, and there's just the charge behind that. But now we're on display not just for our tribe, but we're on display for the literal
Yeah.
whole world. Like
Yeah.
if we are alone in this universe, the totality of self-consciousness
Yeah.
is able to witness this conversation, which is
Yeah.
the which is maybe the self. capital
Yeah.
S, like the capital S self
Yeah.
can witness this conversation. Like that's inviting a wrath judgment.
Yeah.
I pray for the algorithm to direct us towards the people that actually want to see it. But it
I
also represents cultural values of, I don't know if it's cultural values or inherent biological structures that make us want certainty.
yeah.
But I do think it does have something to do with the current way in which man relates to the state too, which
Yeah.
is man relates
Yeah.
to the state as through contract, which thank God we've got contracts for private property and contract for individual rights and individual responsibility and the individual being prioritized over the collective. I mean, that's an
Yeah.
amazing set of
Yeah.
contracts. But what comes with that is that there's, I don't really know what I'm talking about right now, but there's a degree of, because there's a contract, we don't go outside of X boundary, which
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah,
if to some
dude.
degree that eventually does create, if there is an infringement on this kind of intellectual freedom, is there
Yeah.
it this is a question now, is there some degree to which that will create a master slave dynamic?
Yeah.
And do we only need that dynamic, is that dynamic serve us when we're less capable of, what am I trying to say? There's something about that dynamic
Yeah.
that doesn't become as necessary the more individuated you become. You know, you when
Yes.
you become more yourself, you have less need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
At least let's say
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
development means I
Yeah. Yeah.
need
Yeah.
less recognition. I need less, but let's say on the front of moral development and maybe your skill set vocationally. More and more you become more skilled to be able to live without all these loopholes, like
Yeah.
entering the rat race. And I don't know. These are some half-baked ideas at this point, but
Yeah.
I
No, I
resonate with
think,
your fear.
yeah, I think, man, I think the thing about curiosity is and trait openness, right? Like same thing, I think, more or less. You don't know what's gonna show up. And people might not like it. And like it's funny because I'm also thinking too, it's there's such wisdom in people who say nobody cares about you. Nobody's thinking about you. Like you go out into a mall and realize nobody cares what you're wearing or what you're doing. Like, this kind of flip on the not in a discarding the person way, or not in a like nobody cares about you because you have no relationships, but in a sense of like you think about yourself way more than other people do.
People
You
are too
know,
preoccupied thinking about themselves.
exactly, dude, exactly. And so I think there's an important dose of that in here. Um, but I think it may be Peterson that says, you said freedom of speech, and it's really stuck out to me. In order, what is it? In order to think freely, you have to risk being offensive. And even saying that is scary of like, like whatever, like
Yeah, yeah.
because I like and here's the thing, dude. Like, I don't want to be offensive. I fucking love people. Like I really like people. I really do. I think people are good. And what I like yearn for is connection. And in connection, if it's there's a difference between a fragile connection and a mature, steadfast connection. There's a difference between a connection where there is no trust, but a connection, and a connection where there's trust. And talk about this in therapy a lot. I tell people, I think we have this idea in our culture that trust is this all or nothing thing. That like you either trust me or you don't, right? You either trust that I'm going to be take care of you or you don't trust me at all. And that just is a not helpful thing for us, right? Because that's not how things work in our experience. So what I usually tell people at the beginning of work together in therapy is like, I want you to trust that I have your best interest at heart. Well, I don't ask them to do this. I say, first of all, I don't expect you to trust me, but I hope I can earn it. And second of all, this is what I kind of define trust as. And what I hope we can view trust as here is that not as all or nothing, but you trust that I have your best intentions at heart. Um, you trust that I would never do anything to intentionally hurt you. And you trust that although I probably will make mistakes and I may accidentally or unintentionally hurt you, you trust that if that happens, I want to apologize. I want to make amends. I want to talk about it and figure out what happens. And so the trust that I want to invite is not a trust that I won't ever let you down or put my foot in my mouth or make a mistake, but like the trust that I want to invite you into is the trust that whatever comes up in this relationship, like we can work through it. And the relationship has like I want to build a relationship um, that can handle whatever might happen within it. And
That's real trust because it
yeah,
acknowledges that you are partially untrustworthy. It's
which is
saying
the damned
there's
reality of the thing.
there's the damned reality. There's a part of you that could be really hurtful and insensitive,
Yeah,
and it won't hold it well. And by saying
yeah,
I hope I can earn it by us working through whatever does come up is a
yeah.
way of actually being more trustworthy by exposing the fact that there are
Yeah.
places where you're not.
And we're not fostering naivety.
Mm.
We're not saying, oh, well, you should be naive and believe that I'm perfect and can help you so that we can address your problems.
Yeah, that would be bad if all of John Paul's clients came out of therapy naively trusting people that they shouldn't.
That'd be terrible.
That would be really bad.
And it probably wouldn't be bad. It probably wouldn't be helpful for people to believe, like, right there's, I think, the saying in scripture, like, something like trust the word, not the person. Like discern the words of the man, not
Mm.
like something like you should evaluate each truth itself rather than the reputability of the person who's saying it. And I think reputability is really important, but because it's a proxy, I think, for truth saying, but like it would be really bad if everybody who worked with me naively trusted other people, because then we would just do all this glorious work to have them fall flat on their face emotionally, because dude, I like the reality is we live in a world with people who are none of us can be fully trustworthy. But that's what relationship is. It's and the belief that hey, differences between us are actually a fundamental necessity to be in a relationship with each other. Because if there were no differences between us, we couldn't have a relationship because we're the same. And to this, we can't like there has to be a distinction between two things in order for there to be a relationship there. At least it seems to me.
Hmm.
And we won't go back into the non-dual and all that stuff, but like that rather than this is what JP2 says in Genesis, as I've been learning. The idea is that before the fall, differences, especially between man and women, were not an opportunity for suspicion and distrust. They were an opportunity for collaboration and connection and and togetherness. And the sense that I've heard is that after the fall, the differences between man and women now become the basis for suspicion and mistrust of the other. And I think that in that is so on the nose for what's happening right now, so culturally, is that differences are seen as this place of suspicion and mistrust. And so as
Mhm.
soon as like a little difference comes out, it's like destroy the person, destroy the relationship, like get away. And like I just want to live in the reality that I want to live it out, the belief that differences between us are actually an opportunity for connection, to learn and to grow. Although that learning and growing requires a certain amount of vulnerability. But
Mhm.
I really I really want to let go of all these defenses that have kept me safe for so long, that I just don't quite need in the same way anymore. And that means, I think, connecting with other people. And I think that takes a certain amount of courage when, in order to connect, it requires a vulnerability. And it seems easy enough for that vulnerability to be just like super targeted. But I'd rather do that than live behind a big old wall, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm. You're talking about trust.
Trust, man.
What does it mean?
Mm,
What
yeah.
how do we do it? How do we do it and reverence our own sense of self and boundaries? How do we courageously do it in
Yeah.
such a way that doesn't, where is it coming from? You know, where is the trust coming from? And I hear you saying that you want to connect with people,
Yeah.
you love people,
Yeah.
and the inevitability of trust though is it's the letting go of safety to some degree, and it's the letting go of, it's opening up to the possibility of being hurt,
Yes.
and for the sake of something that's good enough to justify that, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe that's the pursuit, maybe that's unarticulate yet, maybe that's not articulated yet, but maybe it's the desire to trust that an honest exploration is good,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
good and necessary, and will take you to a better place than you were before, but in the process may also expose where you're naive, where I'm naive,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
where you're inarticulate and I'm inarticulate. And as we say it with a sense of certainty, we recognize that we feel certain about something that doesn't really make sense. You know, like that risks your
Yeah.
character. Uh, no, it doesn't risk your character. It strengthens your character, but it risks your image, your
Yeah.
public image.
Persona.
But it is a form of sacrifice too, you know, of you're sacrificing the safety of where you are now, which is working, and
Yeah.
it by courageously trekking out towards what is true from the spirit of curiosity, which means I don't know what's going to happen next, means that
Yeah.
you invite upon yourself potentially dangerous ideas,
Yeah.
you know, which is why open people tend to be susceptible to being open to really dangerous ideas, which is why being
Yeah.
open is to some degree dangerous, which is why
Yeah.
open people could probably be, like, for myself, I'll say, as someone who scores over 95% on trade openness, one of the best things I can have is a schedule and a routine and
Yeah.
commitments
Yeah.
that I commit to come hell or high water, because
Yeah.
it's the framework, it's the order
Yeah.
that creates a container inside which curiosity can exist
Mm.
without me. It gives me the experiential knowledge that new ideas are not going to derail me, because look, I'm still living my life. I'm still
Yeah.
showing up for my people. I'm still showing up for my job. I'm still trying to be excellent in my, everything in my life has a standard. And look, I'm still showing up to that as best I can.
Hmm.
I think that actually that is the structure that probably gives curiosity more room, because otherwise it
Yeah.
becomes threatening. It's like, well,
Yeah.
where will we
Yeah.
land? Will I have to suddenly change my whole life's worldview? Which is why
Yeah.
I personally find commitment to the practice of Catholicism so essential
Yeah.
to my spiritual development, partially because the liturgy and the prayers, by the way, the liturgy, the hours, I've been praying again and I find it so beautiful. But what it
Yeah.
does is it gives me a container
Yeah.
inside which to communicate prayers that I may not be feeling in this exact moment, but
Yeah.
which represent a true, it honors a part of
Yeah.
myself and a part of God that is real and that
Yeah.
ought to be honored,
Yeah.
even when I don't experientially feel it. So it can,
Like you were saying about Keating.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that container allows for more exploration without it
Yeah.
being too overwhelming, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. That's what I think. Um, yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. That it's what I think it's so important to have places to express that curiosity, that creativity. And there's such a value to boundaries that allow curiosity, you know? And one of the things that we need, one of the boundaries, I think, to be curious is the permission to be curious. Right? This is intellectual freedom, right? This is like freedom of speech.
Freedom to be wrong.
That's what, yes, exactly. That's what freedom of speech is, right? Freedom to be wrong. And we're not going to burn you at the stake for it, you
Hmm.
know? And
Hmm.
I think that's what I want to live in, is to allow myself the freedom to be wrong. Because if not, I'm going to grab onto ideas out of fear instead of out of a true belief and a true resonance. You know, I want that. Yeah, I think the belief, the that structure, that container, I think is freedom of thought, intellectual freedom. Um, and without it, I don't get how we can exist, because this whole thing's pretty damn ambiguous. You know, there's a lot of murk in the whole being a human. And yeah, man,
Airbending.
airbending.
We're working on our craft of what we would say is true, but we have to let ourselves trip. And
Dude, yeah.
I think what is so helpful is to have some kind of, to articulate what part of God it's serving almost, what aspect of God, whether it's I'm at the service of saying to the best of my ability with as much moral courage as I can sum up what I think is true right
Yeah.
now. And but
Yeah.
I'm doing that under under the microscope of mutual dialogue to test that. And if
Yeah.
anything, it's actually fundamentally it's the much more courageous thing to do, because otherwise the alternative is that we don't think, we have thoughts,
Yeah.
And the thoughts that we have sometimes will, spar with each other. But for the most part, what will happen is that those thoughts become taken to be axiomatically true.
Yeah.
And
Dogmatic.
then you become the servant of your own ideas. Rather, it requires you to have a value of healthy self-criticism, or
Hmm.
at least remaining
Self-reflective, at least.
holding loosely to your own thoughts enough to let the counter thoughts come in and see
Yeah.
that all of them, no matter how strong-willed or certain they are of themselves, let continue to let the drama unfold before you make a claim. And to let the drama
Yeah.
unfold, you got to give a voice to something that might be just dead wrong.
Yeah. You got to have a container. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe this is what this is for me, one thing that really motivates me is I want to know what I think. I want to come in greater contact with my convictions. And I know that the principle of just do it have consistency with the things that you do is a craftsman mindset, which says,
Yeah.
I'm not here to do a slapping good podcast. I'm
Yeah.
here to devote my daily life to the crafts that I want to find excellence in. So for me, that
Yeah.
helps me. It takes away perfectionism as a therapist. My
Yeah.
goal is to show up and give my best, and then to, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, say, where did I miss? Where did I do great?
Yeah.
But the same thing applies to the word and articulate speech. And
Yeah.
I find that I have so many ideas that remain half baked that it actually becomes dangerous to
Yeah.
not give them air,
Yeah.
because they slowly start to crystallize
Yeah.
they become loaves of bread, but
Yeah.
they like don't have yeast
Yeah.
in them or something.
Or push in the shadow.
Or push into the shadow. Yeah, exactly. That's what probably happens mostly for me. So if anything,
And then they're half baked in the
this is
shadow.
this is protecting our loved ones from ourselves.
Yeah. 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 That's pretty good to say.
Yeah, I guess it's a form of shadow work in that sense of
Yeah.
it's saying what we feel to be most true. And I just
Yes,
believe
dude.
that that will correct itself through like courage to say what you actually think, and humility to be open.
Mm.
But you're not so open that you don't first say what you actually
Yeah.
think
You're
at
not
the
the
bottom
peacemaker.
of yourself. Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
maybe the message for me at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Like yeah, the courage to say what you actually think and the humility to be wrong, and
Hmm.
right, Peterson says all the time that the logos is the articulated spoken word of truth that brings order out of chaos. That when we speak truthfully, we take something that's chaotic and we put order in it. And there's that image of like the explorer, right? Where like half of his foot is on, I don't know if you've seen this image, half of his foot is on land and the rest is like he's like in a galaxy and it's like a print, it's like a black and white print. It's really cool. But you were talking earlier about like that dance, like right on the edge, and I think those values of courage and like humility, like man, how could we be on the edge without either of those? And really seeing humility as not thinking more of yourself or less of yourself, but just seeing yourself as you are. I think that's why it's so important for me to really continue to allow myself to come to this recognition of like, this is not mine. Like, what do I have to possess here? Everything I have has been given to me,
Hmm.
all of it. You
Hmm.
know, do I work hard? Yeah, that was given to me too.
Hmm.
And I'm hugely indebted to my parents for exhibiting that.
Hmm.
Do I have relationships that I really invest in? Yeah. Well, that was given to me and shown to me too. Like
Hmm.
I don't have any possession to take for that. Like And I really like that humility to know yourself. It's like I think this is like I think you were kind of this is the way I'm experiencing. I think you were kind of speaking of this too, of like, there's the openness where you like don't even know what you think or what you are. Like you gotta say it to figure out if it fits. Like you gotta put it on to see if it fits. And I don't think we should just put things on like well, I can imagine, the thoughts of like, yeah, but that's dangerous. Like, yeah, but if you try any and I think you're even speaking of this, if your mind's too open, it'll fall out of your head.
Hmm.
You know, but
If your ego is too light, you can't be encountered.
yeah, that's why there's the balance, man. That's where if you don't have any boundaries, then nobody's experiencing you. They're just experiencing an extension of their self that you're manifesting.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I just love what you said about the courage and the humility.
Hmm. And the more that when you first start saying what you actually mean, it's probably just your initial balancing act against the, like, it's probably if you open up the shadow, it's going to look very polarized.
Yeah.
It's going to look very much like all the stuff you've held. Like if you've been holding back a
Yeah.
rubber band for
Yeah.
25 years, it's going to look like
Yeah.
all the stuff that's been held back.
Yeah,
But
dude.
as your shadow and everything that you really think that you don't actually say has room to
Yeah.
speak, it's probably going to start sounding more
Yeah.
coherent. It's
Yeah,
probably
man.
going to take on a bit more of a coherent shape because you will look at what is the shadow is what is not what was made to feel unacceptable. And as you finally get to lay out all that was unacceptable and look at it,
Hmm.
the stuff that is obviously silly will have
It
more of
goes
a chance
away.
to just say, oh, well, not that.
Yeah, dude.
So I think
Man.
it's probably worth committing to letting this be. I mean, it'll be as good as it is, but like giving it permission to be dirty tap water for a while.
Oh
You
man.
know,
Dude, yes.
in order
Yes.
for it to flow clear, it's gotta be dirty tap water.
Nobody knows the dirty tap water like we who grew up in Steubenville, right? This tap water from the bottom of the Ohio
Oh
River,
man,
like
that might need to be our podcast. Like, hey, welcome to Further Up and Further Inward, where we're turning on the tap to get all the dirty water out. Two natives
dirty
from
tap
Steubenville,
water.
Ohio. Nobody knows the dirty tap water like us. Hashtag all our Rust Belt fellow
Oh my
friends and
gosh.
family.
Dude,
Uh,
I'm thinking on top of this, on top of the dirty tap water is hot hose water in the summer,
oh
right? When we were
man,
playing
yeah,
outside,
that's
you had that
universal.
hose,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's just that warm water because it's probably been sitting there from the last day, just literally half baked. Dude, I love that idea of like just yeah, the dirty tap water. And that's why, I I'm planning to start another channel myself, which is just me musing, called On the Journey with John Paul Dombrowski. And one of the things that I was thinking about starting, the kind of first episode, first video, is like essentially like why you should start a podcast. And it's exactly this idea of like the dirty tap water. Like we're so afraid of the dirty tap water. And I think the first thought is like, well, what do I have to offer to other people? Like, well, what do you have to offer to yourself? Like, to give yourself a space to speak, to think, to articulate yourself. Like, and it's like this, right? Like we're on like, I don't know, we're in our offices, we're in our rooms, like, we're like just getting going, like whatever, like really minimal thought and effort, just kind of showing up and seeing what shows up. Like dude, I just that idea of the permission, and because I think this is what we need is the permission to have some dirty tap water,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
and
love that. I love that.
and the permission to see dirty tap water not as a mark of moral decrepancy, but like, dude, we all got dirty tap. Like,
I
yeah,
think of it more as you're a beginner, like
exactly, man.
more articulate people in my experience don't necessarily have a higher IQ, I think that they've just spent more time in the dirty tap water. Like
Hmm.
it's like anything, people might
Yeah.
say, "Oh, Mike, you know how to play guitar really well. How'd you get so good?" I just love it.
Yeah.
I like doing it so much that I've spent enough time doing it that you know, what I do now is impressive to someone who doesn't like doing that all
Yeah.
the time. It's
Yeah.
the principle of like just laying a brick. Even if you just lay a
Yeah, dude.
mediocre brick, just lay the damn brick.
Just
Because
put it
you'll get
down.
good at after 10,000 bricks, you're gonna learn how to lay a brick.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that hard. It's hard when you've
Yeah.
never laid a brick. And
Yeah.
I think anybody can become more articulate. And the way I kind of feel about it is I'm nothing special. I'm
No.
not, I was really privileged to have a liberal arts education. I've had a lot of exposure to Western philosophy, and I have enough spare time to read widely. And
Hmm.
I've got friends who have been mutually interested in this, and I come from a family of academia. That's all, not insignificant, and I'm grateful. I'm very
Yeah.
grateful. But I see myself primarily as just another guy trying to make a little bit more sense of himself,
Yeah.
um and in that sense, I think this is something that maybe can be normalized too, is like
Yeah.
what do you think, can we model a space that shows
Mm.
compassionate and open disagreement?
Yeah. Yeah. An exploration. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
primarily
man.
exploration. Maybe we won't even we'll never disagree. Don't ever disagree with me.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, I think there's something so core in that for me too, of just we live in a culture where everything's so clean and presented. Like maybe this is the shadow part of the Instagrams and the whatever, and like, you know, there's so many parts of me that are so concerned about putting the best foot forward and looking good or whatever. Like, dude, we're talking about like, oh, like, we're gonna get started here. We're not gonna, we're just gonna sit down and do it. It's like, dude, I spent a good amount of time before being like, well, what shirt should I wear? Should I wear a collared shirt? Should I wear a t-shirt? Should I blah blah blah? Like, don't want to come off this way. What are people gonna think if they see a thumb? And it's like, I live mostly in the dirty underbelly of myself.
Yeah, I think
And it's foggy and it's confusing and it's ambiguous. And if I saw me a year ago, I'd be like, wow, JP, you've really figured some stuff out. But I haven't. This is the thing that happens in what is it? What's Alice in Wonderland, right? Where she falls down this hole, she finds herself in this place, and there's this little door on the ground. And I don't know if she drink. I think there's a potion that says like drink the potion or whatever. And then the door becomes huge. And this is what like I think happens in psychotherapy, right? We enter a room and we get to know the room. And then it's like we see a little door in the corner, and we go down to that little door. We like start to open up, and then the door grows, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's another room here, and it's usually filled with spooky bandits, like like.
and then those
But
spooky bandits transmuted to your mother.
yeah, right. And then yeah, it's just all he's like, oh my gosh, all Freudians are right. And then you get to know that room, and then before you know it, like it happens over and over again. And I want to live in a reality where I'm not, I want to live out the reality of letting go of the fear of being seen. Dude, that's it. I want to be seen by the people that I love, and I don't want to be afraid to show myself. Um, I want to be able to be connected to the people I love, and that requires like a vulnerability, you know? And so um
Mhm.
I think there's something to just to the emphasis that our culture puts on appearances and image and what's seen.
Mhm.
And even in, you know, whatever it is, like I love the dirty tap water, you know, the like the dirty foggy underbelly. Like this is a super ambiguous world that we are in. And I'm struggling to figure it all out. You know, I'm
Mhm.
just like doing my damnedest to try to stay afloat and make sense of everything. And I think that's just the nature of it all. And I just kind of want to say, hey, well, I don't know. I think this is normal. You know, I think that's one of the beautiful things about our friendship is like, oh yeah, wow, you know, yeah, this is ambiguous. And like the ability to say, like, we'll see what happens. We're just kind of floating through reality on this little rock, spinning around a flame, skyrocketing through other rocks, circling
And I
around
might
bigger
be you,
flames.
and you might be me, fundamentally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There we are, all one. But
Yeah, no, I hear you saying that you are resonating with the dirty tap water, and
yeah,
you
dude.
l- it's helping you to be genuinely seen, because that's the reality, is that there is dirty tap water. And so by you
Yeah,
showing it, it feels fundamentally like a vulnerability of you. And I think,
yeah.
I wonder if you and I being able to share vulnerably our share
Process.
vulnerably, yeah, our what is not acceptable in
Yeah,
the in casual conversation, maybe. And things that, like,
yeah.
we are just as equally conspiring when we're in casual conversation,
Dude,
where we
yeah,
might
yeah,
we might
right.
shut it down. It's like, yo, bro, why are you talking? Come on,
Yeah,
man, we're having fun. Like, we're
yeah,
just as guilty of that. But
yeah,
if we give this is what I'm thinking about right now. If we give ourselves space to do that with each other safely,
yeah,
it allows us to then give this to other people, which is more
yeah,
ourselves, more vulnerability, it's more
yeah,
transparency in our relationships. Because
yeah.
what happens to me when I haven't had space to actually let this develop is that
Yes.
what I give to people
Yeah.
is my protectors, my protective
Yeah.
country,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
protecting this thing that doesn't have development, and would be would not show up in its undeveloped
Yeah.
form in a
Yeah.
space that doesn't receive it. But if as it develops, as we share what's developed with our loved ones and the people that we care about, it becomes easier to share it, because we now have an understanding of it ourselves to some
Yeah.
degree. And so
Yeah.
I don't think from my experience, like, for example, when it comes to, like, my nuanced, the opinions that I would now call nuanced opinions about faith and spirituality, if I was to try to share that before, it was so
Mm.
inarticulate, and usually I would do it in places that weren't the right places for it, and it would
Yeah.
get smothered. And
Yes, dude.
because I didn't know, it wasn't a space that invited me to discover it. It
Yeah.
was a space that it was the clashing of ideologies, which is just never fun. What ended up happening was that, rather than me continuing to find a space to develop, things like frustration and annoyance or shame in myself would
Yeah.
emerge. And that just shuts
Yeah.
down the development of this raw material.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
by
The
being able to
dirty
do it
tap
in
water.
here, it is a form of not only vulnerability, but in vulnerability in relationships begets expansion of the self, growth of the self.
Yeah.
And the more self, the more that is living within us, the more internal contradictions that live within us, the more rich our relationships, for one. But
Yeah.
also, like, it's something that I aspire to be when I'm 80 years old, is to be able to look at the people I love, and as they tell me the most, what they would consider the most shameful parts of themselves, of course, I would want to have the courage to help people correct if I thought that they were coming to me for that, and I felt like they were really missing the mark. I would want to be able to say that. But in general, I want to have the disposition of clearly unfazed,
Yeah.
clearly kind of like, mm-hmm, which
Yeah.
is a sign of my own contact of that shadow stuff in myself
Yeah.
that has learned to coexist within me. And so that that having all of room for all of those parts that go undeveloped,
Yeah.
partially, because they have to, because to live in society, it can't just be everyone feeling
Right.
whatever they're feeling, saying whatever they're saying. It's
Yeah.
just like there are boundaries to
We
have.
don't want the dirty tap water everywhere at all times in all places.
But if the
Yeah.
dirty tap water emerges in a sacred space, it
Yeah.
can be transformed. And I want to be the person that can hold other people's stuff without
Yeah.
lashing out to it. And I want to be able to hold it and smile and say,
Yeah, man.
"You too? Let's talk about it."
Yes. Yes, dude. Absolutely. And I think the thing that as you were speaking, I was really resonating with is like I think I see this as a practice.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I think that's what I see this as. Eh, this is the practice of the process that is a fundamental yes to reality on reality's terms and not on mine. Like
Hmm. Wow.
this this process of from what I understand, which is the only the thing that I have is my understanding of what it means to be a human, this constant state of both being and becoming,
Hmm.
this continual what is happening between me and existence. I that's what I guess I hope this can be. Is just like a meditation is a practice in being in just like a meditation is a practice of um being present. I guess what I hope is that this can be a practice of me being in myself and relationship
Hmm.
of me giving myself the space to be me, to make mistakes, to falter and fumble, and to be with you doing the same thing.
Well, I
And
think it's worth noting that it's
yeah.
incredibly fortunate that to some degree our arc of development is similar because of
Oh
us
yeah.
being raised in
Yeah.
Steubenville, which is it's not that culturally amorphous. It's a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And so we were disciplined by the same thing, like
Yeah.
this is the things you can and can't do. And
Yeah.
also I think probably to some degree similar experiences towards our parents or in relationship with our parents. But I think you're so right. It's sort of a practice that can only happen in relationship. It is a practice
Yeah.
insofar as it's got its agenda insofar as it's got its bumper lanes, but
Yes.
the important stuff is what happens in the bumper lanes, which is
Yeah.
totally unknown, which is
Yeah.
what makes it a spiritual practice, much like just
Yeah.
free form journaling or writing a song that you don't
Yeah.
know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But I can imagine this will take on a life of its own. I have to pee in a second, but one thing I wanted to say is listening to Jung's Dreams, Memories, and
Yeah.
Reflections, he was asked to
Yeah.
write an autobiography. I don't know if you read
Yeah.
the introduction, and
Yeah. I started reading it.
yeah, so you just read this part of the book, I'm
Yeah.
guessing, then, where he was 80 years old and they wanted him to write a
Right.
biography, but then they asked him questions and they would
Yeah.
basically write his response and they wanted it to be an autobiography. And he was reluctant. But after a year of it, he started to get really engaged with it
Yeah.
because, and he said something like, all of my books are in direct connection with fate. And the way he described fate was, I don't know. I can never premeditate what it is that I'm going to write. But once
Yeah.
I begin writing, it takes on a form that I
Mm.
must serve. And so
Yeah.
he went from like, I don't know, to suddenly he was like, I know you want a biography, but I have to write about my childhood. And
Yeah.
his disposition towards writing is what contributed to his greatness is
Yeah.
that he wrote from self,
Yeah.
which means that it is fundamentally an adventure to go on, not a premeditated book title for a publisher, which there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. I probably will
Yeah.
do that at some point in my life.
Yeah.
But there's something about this that's going to take on a life of its own, and
Yeah.
it makes it exciting, and it also makes us the witnesses. So in that
Yeah.
sense, it's sort of like the sum of our contemplative practice up until now of witnessing to now,
Yes.
can we engage in the dance of engagement meets witnessing the engagement,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
letting the words
Yeah.
flow,
Yeah.
watching what's flowing,
Yeah.
and doing that in relationship. I think that's a pretty profound
Yeah.
exercise.
Think so too. So we will honor your bladder and mine.
Have to go to.
And well, let's just let's wrap it up here, man.
Let's
And
do it. Let's
I
do it.
just love what you said. You said it's an adventure, and excited to be here in the adventure with you, man. And I'm excited for the adventure to take on it's the life of its own. Um, excited to kind of honor the muse and just show up
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Love that.
practice the process. Um, and we'll keep going onward and inward.
Onward and inward. I also think both of us, this is a ripe opportunity to be writing while we're doing this,
Yeah,
because so much is just going to be
dude.
stimulated.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's anyway, sorry, you just closed with our first title and catch line. We've got to close with that, so you got to say it again.
Oh no, dude. I thought okay, we won't keep going for our bladder's sake, dude. I'm honestly like, dude, maybe our podcast should be called Dirty Tap Water.
Or it could be a
The
subtitle.
Adventure of Dirty Tap Water.
Well, it's like
Dude,
onward and inward, and then subtitle opening the dirty tap,
the
or
Great
you know,
Adventure. Yeah, yeah, man.
yeah,
Opening the dirty
something
tap.
like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
Dirty Tap Water, episode 1, Dirty Tap Water, man.
I love it. I love it, man.
Yeah,
And I think it's
yeah,
good that this doesn't, like, this obviously is to people who are inexperienced at doing a podcast, because it's sort of like clunky, but I think that's great. Like, that's something that John and I learned from the Avett Brothers, is that they really reverence the albums at the beginning of their career, that people would say things like, have you ever thought about going back and like redoing them? And they say, no, those are timestamps, those are perfect as
yes,
they look.
dude.
I kind of
I
like,
love that.
that's an act of courage too, for us just to
Yeah,
say, great, this is our first stab, throw it
yeah,
up.
yeah. All right, man. Let's
All
honor our
right.
bladders, and looking forward to continuing on the adventure, man. Thanks.
Likewise.
All right.
I love you.
I love you too, man. Peace.
Talk to you soon. Peace.